Okay, so now we've got your panel box all assembled. Now for the exciting part, we're going to actually do some soldering of the solar cells together. So I've got my equipment here. I've got a soldering gun. I've got the solder here and the flux. And this little pin is just to kind of help keep the tabs down as you're soldering, which you'll see in a minute. So again, safety first. Make sure to keep those eye protective goggles on. And then, as you can see, I've doubled up. I'm not using a respirator, so I'm going to double up these. If you have a respirator, certainly this would be a good time to go grab it and put it on. So you're going to start with the first cell, and being very, very ginger with them. They're extremely fragile, and you want to avoid touching the fronts of them. I just washed my hands. You want to make sure your hands are very clean. If any of the solder gets on them or the flux, you're going to leave a fingerprint that will not come off. And it may not affect the performance so much of the cell, but it's just going to be glaring. Every time you see the panel, that's what you're going to see. So I lay it face down because what we're trying to get are the back contacts here. So I just kind of use my finger to get the tabs kind of lined up so that they're in line with the contacts. And there's a variety of ways to make sure that these are in line. You could, you can build spacers, you can build a grid pattern, or you can just eyeball it. I'm going with the latter. I'm going to eyeball it. Basically, you just want to make sure some of the cells, the specs are a little different, so just make sure that the contact points are lined up. You don't have to worry about the edges being lined up because they're going to vary. So basically, you've got your soldering gun here, and you dip it in to the flux. Now you see all that smoke coming up? I don't want to breathe that. So after you put the flux on there, you take a little bit of this solder, and one thing, if you want to keep the tip lasting as long as you can, try not to hit the same portion of it with the solder every time. That's actually going to create a weak spot, and that's the first part that'll deteriorate. And also, after you're done using it, you want to coat it with a little bit of the lead and tin solder, because that will keep it from oxidizing. So just a little tip on how to keep the soldering gun tip lasting longer. So there's there's two ways to do it. One way is to actually take the ribbon, the tab if you will, and put it down on the contact strip, and then use the solder gun and kind of apply it. I find that that's a little bit slower than just taking the solder gun and just touching the tab. Now what will happen is the solder will actually come off of the gun and it will go on to the tab. And you want to do it 3 times so that you can imagine if it's laid down, you're putting the solder where it will be contacting the contacts. And for the purpose of this video, I'm going to kind of leave this off most of the time. However, when you're at home doing this, you want to keep this on or a respirator because, trust me, it'll give you a headache if you don't. So every time you do that, I like to dip it back in the flux. So you just put a little on there. Then you just go ahead and hit the tabs. And you can see the solder deposit on the tabs. And if there's resistance, if it's not depositing well, just put a little more flux, a little more solder. And sometimes the flux will discolor the backside. Don't be discouraged, it's not going to show through or affect the performance, but you do want to make sure that you're not going to push too much pressure and too much heat to actually burn the cell, which is possible to happen. But this kind of discoloration, I wouldn't worry about. You want to work your way up. And that's good enough. It's actually more than we'd need. You know, realistically, If it doesn't move, it's soldered, but I like to have a little visual so that I know that that connection has been made. And you'll get the hang of it. It doesn't take too long to pick it up. And don't get frustrated if you break a couple cells learning. Just know you don't need to really apply much pressure. Let the heat do the job. So I hit a little bit more flux there. Put a little bit more solder there in the tip. And we've got our first two strung together. Now, two things I want to show you is one, you can see how little solder it really takes to make that connection. You know, there's not much current coming out of these, so they don't need a large pathway to go. Just a little bit. And two, when they're down, they'll move in relation to each other. When you get them out of the box, they're straight. If you attach straight tabs to each other, there's going to be no room for contraction and expansion. You know, as the sun comes out and it heats up, different metals and plastics heat up at different paces. So you want to allow them to be able to kind of move and flex with each other. So I will just take the string, the tab that comes out, and I bend it down. So I get in there nice and close to the cell. I bend it down, then I push it back up around it. I take it and apply it the other way, and then smooth it out. So what that gives you is almost like a little riverbed valley, and that right there allows it to spread out and contract. So let's flip these back over, and we'll do one more. So again, you want to line them up nice and straight. Take your next one, be very careful. And like I said, try not to touch the faces of these cells, because anything that gets onto them, you're going to have a really, really hard time getting off. So, and by the way, this little workspace of mine, it's just leftover plywood from the actual panel box that I've just thrown an old towel on there, just to kind of give it a little matting in case the panels shift a little bit. If there are surface impurities in the wood, it might scratch it a little bit. So I just like to use a nice old towel, and definitely make it old, because you know, you're going to get little solder flecks on it. So you know, definitely don't use anything that you want to keep around. And I can already start to feel the cells heating up just in the couple minutes they've been in the sun here. So again, flux and solder, trying to avoid hitting the same spot every time with that solder. And then just lightly touch the ribbons. And the flux is basically just, you know, cleaning it as it goes along, and you'll know when you don't have flux, because you'll have a hard time getting the solder to come off the tab. It'll just stay on the tab and it'll kind of ball up. That's when you know that you're not using enough flux. So again, you just make those connections. Really trying to keep everything in line. And again, you can see I'm working from the contact point all the way up to the next one. So that ensures that, since the tabs are really conductive to the heat, that by the time I get up there, the tabs actually heated the solder in it, and it's ready to get moved onto the contact. So So this is a good example of me needing more flux. There's solder on there, but it's not coming off. So just dab it in there. It's another good way to check to make sure your gun's hot. If you hear the sizzle, you know you're hot. So I just got a little bit more solder on there. You always want to use this tool when you're hitting the contacts, because if you don't, the tab will actually stick to this and you'll pull it all the way up. So just start back here, work your way up, and there we are, we're connected. So as you can see, before I'm putting it away, get a little flux, put a little solder on there, and that prevents it from oxidizing. And now we've got essentially 3 wired in series. So basically you do this depending on whether you're doing 4 rows of 9, as I mentioned, or 3 rows of 12. You want to do that until you finish your entire string. Now when you get to the very top, you're going to be left with this extra ribbon that you're not going to need, because you'll only need maybe an inch or 2 of it. So you can actually take that, cut it, and then use that to connect these 3 back ones, because since we're not going to have the front of another panel, of another cell coming into this, we're going to need to get some ribbon, some tab ribbon, so that we can have a lead coming off of this. And we'll go into that a little bit further. And one final thing is, if for some reason you're building your panel, you've got them laid out, and you break one, or you realize that you soldered it together askew, not a problem. It's a very, very simple solution. The same way that you put it on, you can take it off. You basically just, you look for a place where you can get a little bit of leverage underneath and just heat it up. And bam, comes off that quickly. I'll do one more for you. I don't want to erase all my work. You just heat it up. So once it's hot enough, it loses its bond and it'll let go. So I'll just put them back on. And you really want to make sure you're comfortable when you do this, because you know, it could take a little while, especially when you're doing it for the first time. There's a little bit of a learning curve to it. So just make sure that you're nice and comfortable. You want to be in a ventilated place. If you are in a work area where there's, say, a garage door, just throw a fan or 2 near the door so it will pull the fumes out so they're not just sitting in there with you. And other than that, just make sure that no one's going to trip on the cord and send this flying, because this tip can be upwards of 900 degrees depending on what model you have. So, you know, just make sure that you're in a secure site, and when you're done, just cover up the flux. This can just stay right in this spool, and there's a little safety light on this one, so when you unplug it, it should go off, and then just leave it enough time that you know it's going to be good to go. But when you think that it's nice and cool, don't touch it. Just put it in the flux. If it sizzles and smokes, then you know that it's still hot. So I'm going to do that last little bit of solder on it to keep it from oxidizing. And there you are. We've got 3 in a row. So you essentially just do that until you get your string, and then from there we're going to lay a little bit of silicone on the backs and go